Okay, so this is the tutorial for Engineering 101 to make the domino. So we want you guys to have this done by next Thursday. That's the first Thursday of February. And we're gonna then 3D print this. So this tutorial is just gonna go over the design of this domino. So we'll show you how to use Fusion as a CAD software in order to make this. So I'll give you guys a quick little couple shots of what this is going to look like so we can kind of familiarize yourself with what we're going to make. So it's a domino, and this hole up here is going to be for letting a key ring go through. So you can make this and put on like a keychain or something. So all that's going to be required is an end result that looks very similar to this. You can have different numbers on either side of this little slot here, but we're going to have the expectation that you guys have these domino markings there. And then on the bottom side, if you want, you can add text here or customize it however you want, but we don't have any requirement for that, so this can be blank if you wish. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to go over the overview of how to use Fusion. So the alright, so Fusion, when you first open it up, it'll have some sort of design window interface open. By the way, I'm using the app. The web browser should be very similar though, so there shouldn't really be any like differences. Okay, Future Keegan here. I'm just gonna make a quick little addition to the video. So I'll going over all the stuff to familiarize yourself with the interface here, and I just realized I forgot to show you guys how to navigate and find your files. And so Fusion has this little data panel here. It's the very top left, and this is where you'll store everything. So Fusion stores all of its files on the cloud, doesn't store it locally on your computer unless you tell it to. So you'll kind of have like a bunch of options. So you'll have like projects. So you usually have like a default project or whatever you called it to begin with, and then you'll create a new project and you'll give it like a name or whatever, and that'll be like where you'll store your files. And then within each project, you can have like your parts. And you have folders within your projects and folders within folders and whatnot. And you can store whatever you want in here, but this is primarily where you're going to end up storing your parts. So you just click on something in here to open it, and then it'll just open on the right side. So because this is like where your workspace is, and then this is like your file management. And you can also upload files to here as well if you have something, maybe a step file from SolidWorks that you're trying to import for machining or whatever. But that's the just a quick little overview of the file management. And you just close that whenever you're not using it. And functionality. So whenever you want to make a new design, you can either go up here to the left, there's this file button. You can do this little drop down, you can make a new part in here, and then you just do create new. You can also select your units here. We're going to be using inches for this. You can also change your units in existing documents by clicking over here under document settings. There's a little option that change active units, and if you click on that, you can change that to whatever you want. So we want to be an inch ounce mass as our units. So if you're not in that, you should go and change that. The other way you can make a new part is by clicking this little plus here. So this will be another new design option, and you can make your new parts here. So we'll get back to that here in a little bit, but I'm going to quickly give you an overview of the layout of here because it's a little bit easier to understand once there's like stuff in your space. So starting from the top up here, this top banner is going to be our like tools to make stuff. So starting on the left, this is the little drop down. We're going to be saying design, but you can use all these other options for different types of things. So manufacture is what we use for CNC machining, so making parts out of metal. But we're going to say design for today. And then over here, we have all of the tools that we use to make our models. So the only tools we're going to need for this model are going to be the Create Sketch tool, the Extrude tool, the Fillet tool, the Chamfer tool, which is in this little drop down. So these are like generally creating things over here in this Create tab here. And then you can always access all of the options available by clicking on these drop-down menus for all of these. So we're just going to be using extrudes today to make 3D objects using the base, which will be a 2D sketch. So if you hover over options, there's a nice little preview that'll pop up that kind of describes what it looks like. So the general workflow is going to be we will create a 2D sketch, and then we will make that into a 3D object by using, in this case, extrude, although there are other commands that also work. And then once we have our 3D object, we'll make more changes with sketches and additional extrudes. And we can also cut with extrudes, so it doesn't just add material, it also removes material. And then once we finish with our overall shape, we will then finally add fillets, which are like basically rounded edges to a part, and chamfers, which are like a 45-degree angle cut, like a bevel at the edge of your parts. So that kind of goes over the main things of this top taskbar. There's a couple other helpful tools here, but that you don't need to be aware of for this. One of those is the measure tool, which allows you to click on two objects and measure how far apart they are. You get angles from this as well, and it's a very useful tool, but we do not need it. So if you click on one of these things and you don't want to use it, you can always press escape or cancel. So you can press escape on your keyboard, or you can click this little cancel option. And so up here, this is the browser tab. I already mentioned briefly earlier that you can go into here and change your units. Also in here, in this little named views tab, is going to include all of the objects present in our thing. So it's going to include the bodies, so our 3D objects, and it's going to include sketches, which are our 2D objects. And then down here on the bottom, you can see how we have this little timeline of things. So it's going to show the order in which we did stuff. So it'll show our sketch, and then 3D objects based on those sketches, and then it's kind of like a timeline of all of our events in chronological order, whereas this up here is like the collection of the actual things that are in our sketch, not just the order of how everything has been put together. Lastly, I'm using a mouse, so if you're on mouse, you can use middle mouse button to pan around and hold shift while you're doing that to rotate. If you're using a trackpad on a laptop, you can always rotate by dragging on this little cube in the top right. This is also your orientation, so it kind of shows where you are in relation to your object. And then you can also click on faces here to align yourself with those. And you can kind of play around with it, but this is generally how you can get yourself in a position. And then if you want to look around the scene, you can always zoom around, so you can kind of zoom in and out to move around, which I find easiest on trackpad. But there are also other options down here in this little like movement and view bar at the middle of the bottom. So orbit will just rotate when you have it selected. If you have pan selected, which is a little hand down here, you can drag it around, which is really intuitive. And those are the main things. So you can also like zoom, so you can zoom in and out using that. But generally, if you have a mouse, it's best to just use that because it'll be the fastest for you. Now, we'll start a new design. So we'll make this domino now. Now I've kind of gone over the brief overview of how things are going to go. So first things first, we're going to make our new design, make sure we're in the correct units, which will be inches. I'll do create new. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select this create sketch option. So we're going to make our 2D sketch, which is going to be our base geometry for our domino. And we're going to select a plane on which to do things. So I'm going to use the front plane because that's generally what a lot of people will use as their starting plane, but you can use whichever one you want. It does not have anything to do with, like it doesn't have any effect on the final result. So now that we're in the sketch toolbar, you can kind of see how we've we got like this grid here. This is going to be our kind of like a little helpful scale that we can reference for stuff. You'll notice also there's this little like dot in the middle. This is our origin. It's got a little black spot, and so we want to relate our things relative to that. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to select this 2-point rectangle option. So I should briefly mention, we're in the sketch menu here. So this is very similar to earlier. So you create your 2D objects here. You can do some small changes to them using these modify tabs. And then you can kind of relate them to other things in your sketch by using these constraints. And we'll go over these a little bit more later. But for now, we're going to select this rectangle option. And you can do any of these, but to begin with, I would recommend the center rectangle. So there's on this little sketch palette banner on the right side of our screen, we can see there's a couple options up here in the top. We're going to do center rectangle, so the first time we click will be the center of a rectangle, and then we will drag a rectangle roughly to where we want to put it. Now, you'll notice everything is blue. That means that I can, if I wanted to drag this all around, it'll move, but because I put my center on the origin, it's not moving anywhere. If I were to not have put it on there, now I can actually, oh, that's not what I meant to do. If I were to have not put it on there, so if I put a rectangle over here, I could move this rectangle anywhere I wanted. So it doesn't necessarily have to remain in the same place. But we would like it to remain in the same place just for simplicity's sake, so we're not going to lose stuff. So now that we have a rectangle, we're going to dimension it. So we're going to give it the proper dimensions that we want. So we're going to do 0.92 inches on this top edge, which will be the width. Oh, I broke that. I'm going to Control Z until that fixes itself. So you can always use Control Z to go back, which is, pretty familiar to those of you who have used any computer programs in the past. So the way you dimension something, you will click on a line or between two objects. So the first one, I just clicked on that top line and it defined the length of that line. And now I'm clicking between these two ones to get the distance between them correct. And these are equivalent because it's a rectangle, but there are differences sometimes. So now that I've selected those two, I'm just going to click a third time, and that will establish the dimension off to the side. And now I can enter in the values I want. So I'm going to do 1.92 inches. Sorry, not 1.92, 2 inches, and that'll be the height of our rectangle. Okay, this is Future Keegan again. This is just one other small thing. Uh, I briefly forgot to mention, you can double click on an existing dimension on the number to change the value. This is a very important thing, so I just want to make sure that this gets through to all of you. And so just if you need to change it, you can always go in there and do that. You can also, within this little dimension menu, you can mix units. So you can do 0.92 inches plus 5 millimeters. And that will actually do the math in there and give you a nice mixed unit. So if you're doing something weird that needs both metric and imperial units mixed, you can always do something like that. So just want to drop in and say that while I was looking over the video. So this is the general shape of our domino if you were to be looking from the top down at it. And now that we've gotten to this point, we're going to use the fillet command. This is going to kind of add a little curve to your edges, your corners, so they're not going to be sharp. So we're just going to grab this and we're going to click on all of the edges. So just click on one edge and then the other line that you want to kind of bridge this gap between. And it's going to add this radius to them, and you can select them all in an order. So you don't want to do enter or type in the value on this number until you've already selected all the ones you want to do. Otherwise, it'll make it so you have to reselect a couple of other ones, and they won't all be set to the same radius at the same time. So if you want to change your radius, you wouldn't be able to do it to all of them at once. Now, you can do this radius between a 1/16 of an inch and a 1/4 of an inch. It is up to you. I'm going to stay with the 0.2 inches that it provided me here, because that's fine by me. And I will push enter to save that. Now I was going to say, it's going to pop up a little warning. We can ignore this. It's just telling us that these diagonal lines here, they're dotted. These are construction lines, so they don't have any effect on the when you're bringing your 2D sketches into 3D. They're just there to help guide your sketch in relation to itself. And it's giving us an error because it's no longer touching the corners of these with the corners of the rectangle. So you'll notice that now everything in here is white, so all of these lines are white. I'm using dark mode, which is why this is the case, but if you're using light mode, it would be black, and it's doing that to show us that everything is fully constrained. Nothing can move, there's nothing that uh, is not defined. If there were still degrees of freedom or things that could still change, they would all be blue. But as it stands, we're looking pretty good, so we're going to move on to the next step. So we're going to choose this create diameter circle, centered diameter circle, and we're going to click somewhere on our part. You want to be careful not to click on this dot that's already popping up in all the radiuses. That's because if you do that, it'll be bound concentrically. So the centers of both those circles will be locked to the same place because you can think of these radiuses as like a quarter of a circle, the fillets that we've just put on earlier. And you also want to be careful not to place it on this line because you see as I'm dragging my cursor along this line, there's an X appearing. That means it's going to lock it to the line, and you can drag it up and down the line, but you can't move it off the line unless you remove that relationship. So it's best to just click on an empty space here. Now that we have that, we're going to grab our sketch dimension tool. A helpful little trick, if you press D on your keyboard, that is also the shortcut for dimensioning your sketch. So we'll grab that and we're just going to click on the edge of our circle, and that'll let us put in our radius or diameter. So we're going to do 0.201, and that'll be in inches, of course, along with the rest of our part. And that's going to be the width of our hole that we're going to put through the part so your keyring can go through. Now we're going to select this little dot in the middle. So this little point in the middle, we're going to select that, and then we're going to select the edge here. And this is still using that dimensioning tool that we have, because ideally it shouldn't have gone away after you dimensioned the diameter of that circle. So we're just going to click and put another dimension in here, and we're going to set this to something that is close to the wall but not up against it, if you will. So I'm going to do 0.175 inches, and you can feel free to use that value for yours as well, assuming you went with the same radius for those fillets as I did. But if you used a different radius for those fillets, you can also use whatever value looks best to you. It should just kind of look similar to this. So there's like material there that the hole isn't going to be like too close to it to tear through, but it's not so far in the center of the part that you can't put your keyring in it. So now that we have dimensioned it, so we clicked on each of these walls, so we click between the dot and the wall, and we click between the dot and the wall. We're going to call that okay. So we're going to then finish our sketch because everything that we need for this first sketch is done. So what we've done here is we've made the profile that we're going to extrude into 3D for the like overall body of our domino. And so we'll click, you can either push finish sketch up here in the top right, or you can click finish sketch on this banner on the side. So now you'll notice we have this little sketch here. It's all good. If you want, you can also look at it in 3D. And in fact, I'm going to stay in 3D just to show you what the extrude looks like from a more intuitive perspective. So I'm going to click on the extrude option. It's going to be right next to the create in this little solids tab. So we're going to do extrude, and it's going to let you select regions of your thing to do. So you can either click on this guy or this guy, and it'll have a different result. So we want to click on this bigger one right here, because this is the profile that we want to bring into 3D. So you can drag this arrow to kind of show where the direction that it's going to be extruding. And we're going to want this to be 0.3 inches. And you'll press enter to save that. And by default, the extrude will just kind of add material, but we'll show you later how it can also remove material. Okay, so now that we have this 3D part, because now it is a 3D part, it's popping up in this bodies tab here. So you notice how we had sketches before, they have this little like drawing symbol, and these bodies are more of a 3D uh, sketch or like drawing. And so this right here is our body one object. And now that we've extruded, the sketch is no longer visible. If you want to use that sketch again for something else, you can just retoggle the visibility by clicking on this little eyeball to the left of it. And you can also toggle these as like groups. So if I want to hide the bodies, I can. So like if I do that, you can't see it at all. But I do want to see it, so we're going to leave that exposed. You can also go back in time. So there's this little thing right next, like in your like timeline over here on the bottom, and you can drag that back. So if I wanted to see what it looked like in the previous step, I have to re-enable the sketch because it's not visible right now. But it basically shows us just the sketch now instead of the 3D object. It's kind of like moving back in time. Um, so we're gonna now move on to the next step. So we're going to create the slot. So I'm going to orient myself on the front side of this again, and we're going to use the create sketch option again. And we're going to be careful. We don't want to click on this plane thing right here. We don't want to click on the background. We want to click on the actual face of the domino. So it's kind of lighting up as like this, like a, for me right now, like a brighter gray. And that's going to show that we're selecting the correct spot. And the reason we want to do this is because this is what's going to allow us to reference the edges of that domino for uh, more stuff in our sketch. If we didn't do that, we'd have to do a couple other loops to jump through, and it's a little more annoying. So just make sure that you select the actual face of the domino when you're doing that. Now, we're going to create that little slot that we saw earlier on the domino. So I'm going to go quickly back to the old domino. We're going to create this slot right here that runs kind of across the middle. So we're going to go to this create drop down because we're in the sketch tab now, because we're going to create sketch, and we're going to drop down to the slot menu, and we're going to use the center point slot option. Now you can click on any of those and then just find it from here, but we want to specifically use the center point slot because if you follow the tutorial so far, you'll see that we can actually select the origin still, and we can reference our slot off of that. So the first click that we do will be the center of our slot. The second click will kind of be the width of the slot, and then the third one will be the like diameter. So we just told it to kind of be in those sizes, but we still need to dimension it. It's not just going to be like automatically good. So we want to select the width of the slot to be 0.6 inches. So you can either click on this dotted line, the construction line as I mentioned earlier, or you can click on these two dots on either end, and either one of those works. Now we're also going to dimension the width of the slot, so we're going to click on those two lines and we're going to add a dimension that's 0.13 inches. Now you can see it's fully defined, all of our lines are white, which is showing that we're doing good. Now alternatively, I'm going to imagine that I had used a different rectangle earlier, which this might apply to several of you because we were using the 2-point rectangle as an option for making our original thing earlier. So this is like kind of what that 2-point rectangle looked like. We're going to imagine that we had used that to create our domino, so it was like off center. And so that would basically mean that like maybe the corner of our domino is on the origin instead of the center. So we can't place that slot that we want to be in the middle of our part directly on there. So what we're going to do instead, we're just going to place our center point slot somewhere else. It doesn't really matter where, as long as it's horizontal. And we're going to dimension it. So we're going to tell it the right width. We're going to do 0.6 inches again. And we're going to choose the width as well, or sorry, the thickness of it as well. So 0.13 inches again. And you'll notice that it's still all blue. So the shape of it is locked. So like the slot will not change in size, but we can still drag it around because it's not fully defined. So if I wanted to, I could drag this point onto the origin and that would work, that would constrain it, but we want to show you what you would do if you didn't have that ability or that option. So the best way, in my opinion, is going to be you'll go to the create drop down, and you're going to select point. What this is going to do is going to make those little points that we have in these. So we're just going to drag it along this top edge until we find the X with a triangle that shows that it's at the midpoint of that line. And then we're going to do the same on the horizontal. So we're going to find the midpoint of this line on the domino. Alright, so now that I've placed two dots there, you can see how they're fully defined. They're black. So black dots are fully defined. Blue dots are going to be slightly underdefined. So now what I can do, I can drag the slot kind of close to where I want it to be in the end. And we're going to hold shift and we're going to click the dot in the middle of my slot. And then we're going to click the dot at the top. And we're going to use this constraint over here. It's the horizontal / vertical constraint. What this does is it's going to lock the alignment of the two of them, so it's going to be like imagining there's an imaginary line that runs directly vertical between those 2 points. And then we're going to do the same thing. So if you have this selected already, you don't need to hold shift and click. You can just click one of them and then click the other. And it's going to snap it down. So now it's like there's an imaginary horizontal line locking them. And so that'll lock it positionally and get that slot in the middle just like we want it to be. So next up, we're going to add our actual domino pattern. So I'm going to be adding I'm going to do one dot on the side with the hole, and I'm going to do 6 dots on the upper half. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make one dot, or sorry, one circle. I guess I'm calling them dots because that's kind of what I think of when I look at a domino, but we're going to be using circles to do this. So I'm going to quickly dimension the circle to be the same thickness as that slot, so 0.13 inches. And then we're going to dimension it relative to this point here in the middle. So it's going to kind of tell it how far away from that do we want it to be, and we're going to go 0.5 inches. Now you'll see that this is still not fully locked. It can actually pivot. So that's because it's dimensioned according to this dot here. If it was dimensioned according to this line, it would be able to move back and forth, kind of the way my mouse is moving. But in any case, the best way to fix this, we're going to use this horizontal vertical constraint again. And I'm going to use that. I'm going to click on this guy, and then I'm going to click on this guy. And then that'll align them again, just like we did earlier with aligning the slot. And now I'm going to move on to creating the 6 in the top, because this center dot is perfectly fine. It's in the right place, and I'm happy where it is. So I'm going to make another 3 dots up here at the top. And it doesn't really matter what size they are for now, because the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go to this line option. So this is what you just use to create lines. So like, this is kind of what you would think of when you're making a drawing. And there's a special option over here. We're going to enable this to be a construction line. Now we're going to use these construction lines. You saw them kind of popping up with our center rectangle and our slot earlier. But now we're actually going to use this construction line. So we're going to click on it, and you'll know that this will be a construction line because when we place stuff, it'll be dotted, as you can see there. And this little construction thing is going to be checked, or it's going to be kind of darker. So we're going to create these lines, and we're going to do one between the centers of the top and the bottom of our 3 circles that we just placed. Now, this middle one is not tied to those, but these two are kind of like tied together now. So we're going to quickly hold shift and click on the center of the circle, the 3rd circle that isn't already attached on the line, and we're going to hold shift and click on the line, the construction line, and we're going to choose this triangle option in the constraint. So this is the midpoint constraint. What this does, it's going to pull the center of this circle and place it on the midpoint of this line. So I'm going to click that, and now you can see that it's on the midpoint of the line. So now, if I were to move these, you can see they're all equally spaced apart. That was the kind of the end goal of trying to do that. So I'm using constraints to define my geometry. So there's no dimensions involved at all right now. It's all just the using constraints. So it's just kind of giving you a little bit of an insight into what those are useful for. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to click all of these circles, all three of them, and then I'm going to click this other fourth circle that I've already given a dimension to, and I'm going to use the equal constraint. So the equal constraint is going to be giving it the same dimension. So if you clicked on 8 lines, all different length, they'd all become the same length. And for us, it's going to set these all to be the same diameter. So now we have all of these have the same diameter as that one that we already came up with earlier. Now you can see we still move this around wherever we want, but it's just kind of locked vertical. So what we're going to do the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the center one is at the same center as the bottom one there. So we used 1/2 of an inch for that. So we're going to also position this at 0.5 inches. So now, oops, thinking. All right, so now you can see how it can move from side to side, but it's not going to move up or down at all anymore, even if I move my mouse. So the final step to constraining these guys and making them actually locked to one place, we're going to go back to our line and make sure it's still a construction line. And we're going to select the kind of joint between the line here on the top of the slot and the like the cap, like the curved part. So it should be a little square that little pops up. It won't be an X like it would be on the lines next to it. And we're going to click on that, and then we're just going to move it directly up. And so we're going to make sure it's a vertical line. So let's just make sure it's 90 degrees to that. And what we're going to do, we're going to use another one of these constraints. It's called the tangent constraint. So we're going to click on the tangent constraint, and we're going to click on one of these circles, and we're going to click on this line. And what it's going to do is it's going to make it so that this circle is now tangent on that line. So that's pretty cool. You can see how we're almost completely defined now. And so the only thing now is the spacing between these, because these can still kind of move apart from each other. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to use the dimension tool again, and we're going to dimension the space between two of these points. And I'm going to be using 0.25. And that'll give me the spacing between between each of these points here. So now I have 1/2 of my 6 dots. I have 3 of them, and I want to give it another 3 dots. So the last step I'm going to do for that, I'm going to go back to my handy construction line. I'm going to find the midpoint. So I can just kind of drag the start of my line along till I find the midpoint of my slot. And I'm going to move another line all the way up to the top. By the way, with construction lines, it often doesn't matter where your endpoints are. It's usually the angle and like following along them that matters. So you don't have to worry about these being like at the right place. Like these ends can just be free. As long as it's a vertical line, that's all that matters. And we're going to use, the way we're going to make this 3 dots into those 6 dots, we're going to use one of these more helpful commands over here. It's called the mirror command. So if you click on this, it'll have 2 options pop up. So we have objects and the mirror line. So the objects are what we're going to mirror over the line. So it'll be very apparent what I'm talking about once I select them. So I'm going to select all 3 of these circles. And for the mirror line, so I'm going to click on this new selection. I'm going to click on this new construction line that I just put in. And you can see how it's giving me a little preview of what it's going to look like. So it's going to give me all 3 of these dots just kind of mirrored over that line. So I'm going to say OK. You can also push enter, that works fine as well. And now you can see we have all 6 of our dots there. So now I've done everything I need to in the sketch, so I'm going to finish this sketch and move on to the next part. Okay, so next up we're going to use the extrude command to reduce, we're going to kind of remove material, so we're going to do cut instead. So click on the extrude option, just like we did earlier. And we're going to do, instead of new body or join, which are like the additive ones, we're going to use cut, which is subtractive or removing of material versus adding material. So we're going to use the select profiles option, and we're going to select all of our things that we just made. So our slot, and then all 7 of my dots. You might have a different number of dots if you chose to do it differently. That's okay. And we're going to type in negative 0.09. Now, it has to be negative because I'm going to show you what it looks like real quick, but we're going to go to the side. So you can kind of see how it's cutting into the part. If I just did it positive, it would be coming up, and you can't really cut into nothing because you're not removing anything, right? So we're just going to say negative 0.09, and we're going to say OK. And so now we have the rough shape of our domino. Now you'll notice we have like 90% of the domino, but it doesn't quite look good, right? So it's all very blocky. There's no curves really besides the fillets on the edges. And to get from that point to this point, we're going to start adding our fillets and our chamfers like we have on my example model. So the way we're going to do that, we're going to select the fillet option, which is this right here. And we're going to select the edges and the bottoms of all of these holes on the side. So we're going to do each one of these. So all of them one by one. And now that I've selected all of these, I'm going to type in a radius of 0.065 inches. And make sure you have a constant radius type. So this is basically just telling it to be a circle instead of some weird parabolic curve or something. And make sure that your corner type is rolling ball. Now, I'm just going to press OK. You can kind of see there's a preview of what's happening. It's making this like curved shape in the bottom. So I'm going to press OK. And now you can see we have this like perfect little sphere going on. So it looks very pretty, nice and curved. There's no flat spots in the bottom. And that's kind of what we want to see when we make this out of metal, if you guys decide to do that. It won't be quite as obvious with 3D printing, but this will be a nice curved thing. That already looks better. But there's one more thing we can do to make everything better too. So we're going to put on that chamfer now. It's the last step that we have to do. So we're going to select chamfer. So it's in the drop down under modify. And we're going to use a nice little trick on this top side. So instead of selecting all of these edges, so because that'd have to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 edges, because we're going to be doing the whole and around all of these and the edges of our part. That's a lot of times to click. So what we can do instead on this side is actually we can just select the face. And what this is going to do is it's going to chamfer every single edge that borders the face. So everything on this like kind of like region that's shaded is going to chamfer every edge as long as it can actually do it. So we're going to do 0.02 as the value, so that's 20 thousandths of an inch of a chamfer. And we're going to say OK. And all these things should be fine as a default setting. And you can always check this if it's different from yours. And then you just push OK if you wanted to. But what we're actually going to do, we're gonna remove the selection step because I forgot the other side. So we're going to select both sides. So you can rotate your object over to the other side, and we're going to select this bottom face as well. And now I can actually set this to be our 0.02 inches. And I'm going to press OK. And voila. Now our domino looks complete. We got all those chamfers, we have those fillets, and it's very pretty. And this is all you need to come to class with on Thursday. So if you're going to be doing this on your laptop, that's great. Just make sure you come charged on Thursday. And if you're going to be doing this on your desktop, make sure, I'm going to quickly show you how to export it. So actually, very quick, we're going to go over saving this. So click this little save icon here. You can also do Control S. Those both work to save it. And you just save it with whatever your name you want. So this is going to be example Domino 2 in my thing. I'm going to save that. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to, so this is for those of you who might be doing this on a desktop at home. What you're going to need to do is you're going to need to come to class and actually be able to use your model. So you can go to this little export option. And this is basically like your save as format usually. So you get to choose what file type, and you're going to choose .step as your file type. And then you can save it as whatever you want, but just make sure you can bring this on a flash drive or maybe on whatever other device you're going to be bringing if you don't have Fusion on the device that you're bringing to class. But yeah, that's the gist of it, and don't forget to have this all ready by class next Thursday. Alright, thank you very much, and have a good weekend.